Welcome back to Science on the Sofa. Today, I'm joined by an esteemed group of colleagues to discuss an important topic in HIV prevention and treatment: clinical trial diversity. Why? It's essential to ending the HIV epidemic. Let's jump right into it. Why is diversity in clinical trials so important? Alton.
Diversity in clinical trials matters, and that would be a full stop. You could stop there, but to elaborate, it's really because diversity in clinical trials is about representation. It's also about better science. People from different backgrounds, including different ages, races, ethnicities, genders, they may react differently to certain medical treatments. And if in the research trials we don't have that diversity and that representation that we need in the patient population, the results might not apply to everyone. And that then further exacerbates our existing healthcare disparities that we see.
Scott, you're an R&D. So what are your thoughts about diversity in clinical trials?
Well, from a scientific perspective, many factors impact how we respond to medicines. Some of those are cultural, some of those are social, and some, in fact, are very personal, like how our genes impact our response to drugs. By having diversity in our trials, it helps us understand our drugs better. It helps us reduce the biases that have been traditionally associated with clinical trial participation. It promotes social justice, and it leads us to better science, more innovative science.
Let's get down to the numbers. What is the current state of clinical trial diversity today?
Yeah, lack of representation is a global challenge, especially in HIV trials where race data has been historically underreported in 2/3 of studies. For example, in the UK, only about 5.7% of people from minority groups have ever even been in a clinical trial, even though they make up 13–14% of the UK population. Inside the US, about 3/4 of clinical trial participants for the drugs that were approved just last year were white, while Black individuals and Hispanics that represent 14 and 20% practically of the population were underrepresented. That's what we need to fix.
If we're going to actually increase participation among groups that are historically underrepresented, we really need to break down barriers that impede them participating. And that often requires having an honest conversation about, distrust, mistrust, and apprehension about participating in clinical trials. So, Dr. Timms-Cook, I think you had a perfect example of this.
We talk about clinical trial diversity and why it's necessary to ensure that groups that are typically underrepresented in clinical trials have adequate representation. One of those groups, of course, is Black women. What we know from stats in the US is that 20% of new HIV transmissions occur amongst women, and then Black women make up almost 50% of those transmissions. So of course it's important to galvanize and put effort into getting that demographic in our trials. ViiV Healthcare devised a wonderful study to recruit Black women into a clinical trial, looking at preferences and different aspects of using HIV prevention. One of the challenges that came up was a sense of medical mistrust based in what happened in Tuskegee, Alabama. Tuskegee refers to a very infamous study that was conducted from 1932 to 1972 in a small town called Tuskegee, Alabama in the United States. In that study, there were over 600 men who acquired syphilis through natural sexual transmission, but they were left untreated to study the pathogenesis of the disease. Those participants went untreated when there was an effective treatment during that course of time, with quite tremendous efforts to ensure that they never got access to treatment, even if they moved other places. Because of that legacy, there's a lot of mistrust, obviously, but because the study is globally known, it has manifested in significant distrust, especially amongst African Americans. We had a wonderful lady who was a direct descendant of someone who participated in that study speak to the group and speak candidly about details that you wouldn't read in a book, that you'd only glean from someone who had that lived experience. She is a part of a wonderful organization called Voices for Our Fathers. And so it's a group of people who are all descendants of those gentlemen who participated in the study. Her biggest point was, just as we're saying, the importance of having the appropriate representation of all people, of all demographics participating in our trials. It was very uplifting to have her tell the story of what happened there.
I'm loving this conversation. I hope you guys are too. So I like to say we talk about it, but how do we be about it? What are some of the key actions that we need to do to really increase the number of diverse participants in our clinical trials?
I think what that requires is for us to be intentional in our pursuit of representation in all of our clinical research. I think we have a responsibility of acknowledging what was legitimate about the past and the history of what has led to mistrust, but build trust from that with the right messages, right messengers, and ensure that we have ethical representation in our clinical studies.
I think inclusion and diversity aren't just buzzwords here at ViiV Healthcare, and they shouldn't be. They're at the heart of everything that we do. They help us power the innovation behind our cutting-edge medicines and pipeline research.
I think we have a lot to be proud of. When we bring different perspectives together, we improve the strength of our research. We improve the strength of our team, the people who do all this work, and we support our overall mission to end the HIV epidemic.